Okay, good morning, everybody. Firstly, I would like to thank Professor Carmen Galán and all the scientific and organizing committee for this opportunity to co-moderate this session with Professor Carsten Schiott. Our session is dedicated to Ragweed, a well-known invasive plant that cause severe health problem in many parts of the world. Now let's start with the first presentation, and I'm happy to introduce Professor Carsten Schiott of the University of Worcester. He speaks about biological weed control to relieve millions of allergy sufferers in Europe. Please, Carsten.
Thank you very much, Mara. And yes, here I hope you can all see the presentation. The title is Biological Weed Control to Relieve Millions of Allergy Sufferers in Europe. So it's collaborative work between a larger number of institutes, and it was actually published this year. So you can get the paper from the journal. It's open access. And it's the last study from a cost action SMARTER running from 2012 to 16. SMARTER means Sustainable Management of Ambrosia artemisifolia in Europe. The web pages from SMARTER are still available, and they are now being hosted by the International Ragweed Society. So the background is really this new invasive species that has arrived, which can actually feed on ragweed, and called Ophrala communa, a small insect. And I have put a disclaimer here at the bottom, at actually that this cost action SMARTER, it had no role in the accidental spread of Ophrala communa we have just observed. So the background is that Ophrala communa, small insect, this ragweed leaf beetle, it entered into Europe in 2013, and this invasive species feeds exclusively on ragweed, and ragweed is also an invasive species, and now causes problems in at least 30 European provinces. So we all know there's a problem with the allergenic pollen, but there might also be issues in relation to agriculture as a weed. So, so the Smart Action published this study here also with Heinz Müller-Scherer in the lead, and we also have Maria as co-author here, also available online. Another study, also with Maria in the lead, is that was also published, is that we have seen a rapid decreasing trend in airborne ambrosia pollen in the Milan region, and could this actually be related to Ophrala communa? Oh, yes, indeed. At least all evidence so far points towards this. Again, this study is available. You can get it here from this link. So the obvious question you could ask here, what would actually happen if Ophrala communa spreads to its maximum extent in Europe? What is the maximum extent in Europe? Is it the Milan region? Is it part of Italy? Is it most of Europe? And secondly, what would the implication be on hay fever sufferers? Because it seems to be extremely efficient in actually eating the ragweed plants, defoliating, eating the pollen. I have a number of pictures here below showing examples of the ragweed beetle attacking the ragweed plants, and in the end, say within a relatively short time, there's nothing left, no leaves, no pollen grains. We also have some pictures here on with respect to the beetle itself. We have picture D below. You can actually see the small beetle, and once it starts to populate a region, then we get several generations within the same area, and within a short time we get huge quantities of this ragweed beetle, and you can harvest, as an example here, large amounts within isolated areas, which means that it can actually defoliate large areas with ragweed found, for example, as we've seen near the Milan region. The second question we can ask is, will this have a financial implication? Because we do know that there's a substantial cost related to ragweed and hay fever. So the method we took was that we decided to review all information we could get on exposure and patient numbers in Europe. So we have a figure here that shows the structure. So we try to assess the European pollen exposure, and then we also try to assess how many patients do we have, how many patients are having hay fever, how many are sensitized to ragweed, and we use this information try to calculate the impact on the sensitized patients, and in the end calculate the economic valuation. That would be our base scenario. And then we have another scenario, which means that we actually calculate the distribution of Ovrella communa and the impact model on the pollen exposure, because Ovrella communa will also reduce the pollen concentrations. And then we carry out the sensitization calculations again, and the final economic valuation. So this is really a construction of a set of geospatial models from different disciplines. So we are talking about ecology, for example, Ovrella communa, aerobiology, that's pollen, occupational health, that's the sensitized patients, and occupational health and economy in the end. So let's have a look at the results. And again, we reviewed the information we could get, and during the period 2004 to 12, tried to estimate the total amount of ragweed exposure using existing published studies. So we managed to use 4 published studies conducted within SMARTA, covering the main ragweed centers in Europe, and added on top of that a large number of studies from 22 different countries, and I have a picture of the map here to the right. So in this particular case here, we used the overall ragweed pollen integral during the period 4 to 12, so until the year before the ragweed beetle arrived. So the picture to the left then is an estimate of the total pollen exposure, annual pollen exposure within a given region, here gridded to 10 by 10 kilometer. The next thing we did was then we calculated and got information on number of hay fever patients from a large number of studies typically carried out at hospitals. I have here the picture B and C to the right that shows the information we have and where we have it from. So that shows the number of patients affected by hay fever, and we also have the number of patients that are sensitized to ragweed. So these two data sets were combined to produce the figure we have in A, which shows a percentage of ragweed sensitized patients in European population. So we can use this in the occupational health model along with the economic model. Then we're going to the ecological model, and here we use 2 different approaches. We use an approach that produced the figures to the right. So the figures to the right, that's really the reduction potential of Ovrella communa. So this is based on actual field studies in Italy and manipulation experiments where we studied the impact of the ragweed beetle if it was within an area expanded to its maximum extent, and how much would of the ragweed plants will it eat, how many of the pollen will disappear. So we're actually getting a reduction in percentage, and typically in the range say 82%, and in some cases up to 92%. So a substantial reduction if the beetle is allowed to expand to its maximum extent. It will also have an overall and quite substantial impact on the daily pollen integral again. So we have here the top right figure. So then we know that the impact of the beetle itself within a given region, but actually how big an area is this beetle going to populate in Europe? And for this, we used a number of different mathematical models, generalized linear models, boosting models, random forest, and maximum entropy. They're all statistical based, so they use typical climatic variables, and it can also be land use and land cover. So with respect to where we have the beetle, for example, in the United States. So we use this and then we apply it to Europe, and we use the combination of models in order to get rid of the uncertainties. So we're using an ensemble in this particular case. And the figure here then shows the different colors shows how many generations we are expecting to get within a given region. And when we can see here that, for example, Italy and the Pannonian Plain, we're getting 3 to 5 generations, but while further up in Europe, we're getting 1 to 2 generations. It will not occupy the entire area where we have Ambrosia artemisifolia, which is the light green color. But the major ragweed areas are going to be populated by the ragweed beetle if it's allowed to spread naturally to its entire to the entire area where it can actually populate and regenerate. So then you can talk about how is this going to impact the patients in the end. For this, we used a large number of data from the Rhone-Alps region. So I have here the figure here that shows the connection between the seasonal pollen integral for ragweed and the number of patients per 10,000 population. So there's a very strong statistical relationship in this particular case here with the seasonal pollen integral for ragweed and the number of patients. So this can be used to estimate if we're getting a reduction in the seasonal pollen integral, how large a reduction are we going to get in the patient numbers. So this is really the occupational health model, which we can then use in the end to with the valuation model, the economic model. So this is what we're getting. We're having 3 types of results. So we have here, I have 3 tables. The first table is, again, we're looking, for example, Albania, Andorra. So we have all the different European countries in these tables. And we have the population in each country. Then we're having the fraction that is sensitized to allergy. Then we have the fraction that is sensitized to ragweed. And then we have the fraction that's clinical relevant. So again, we see a decreasing percentage. So these numbers will vary from region to region. Then we have the second table. Then we have, again, country, just taking Albania in the beginning. Then we have ragweed sensitized persons before the arrival of the beetle and after the arrival of the beetle. The same with the clinical relevant ragweed sensitized persons before and after the arrival. And then we have a percentage change. In the end, then we can calculate the medical costs for each of the countries here. And then now I have a bigger table. You can see Albania, Andorra, Austria, Belgium, etc., where we can see before and after the arrival of the beetle, the medical costs. In this case, the 2 columns to the left, that's the actual medical cost in each country. And the cost to the right, this is what we call PPP. This is purchasing power parity, which means that then you have adjusted the numbers so you can compare the numbers in between the different countries. Overall, we find in Europe as a whole that we can save more than €1 billion a year if the ragweed beetle is allowed to populate the entire area where it's allowed to able to regenerate, and in particular into 3 to 5 generations. So again, we do see, for example, that some countries take Bulgaria as an example, we have some reduction. Croatia, we have a large reduction, but while we go to Andorra as an example, hardly any reduction because we have hardly any plants. So again, the numbers vary from place to place. So in the end, in the study here, we do find when we are calculating the sensitization levels throughout Europe, that there's a large variation in the sensitization level. So we're looking at the maps, and generally speaking, it follows the pollen exposure. So, however, there are some exceptions, and so we see a higher sensitization level compared to, say, the, for example, Pannonian Plain. If we're looking into Poland, Netherlands, and Denmark, and probably the relatively high sensitization levels in these areas, still lower than, for example, northern Italy, is probably caused by either traveling or cross sensitization, for example, by Artemisia pollen. If we are calculating this all over Europe, and then we're getting about 13.5 million. They all suffer from ragweed allergies. And we find that Ophrella communa, the ragweed beetle, is able to establish itself in all ragweed centers. And especially those where the climate is favorable, we can get 3 to 5 populations. And in these regions, we expect to see a reduction in the pollen exposure with up to 82%. So we also find that there's a large national variation in the costs caused by ragweed pollen. Again, we can compare, for example, Croatia with UK, hardly any impact. UK is in north, Croatia, there's a huge impact. But generally speaking, if we're looking into this and we say and Aerobiology Kommune is able to spread and maintain the numbers, then we can expect a long-term reduction in pollen exposure and reduce the patient numbers with about 2 million. So there's a substantial impact, again, assuming that the beetle will be able to maintain its presence in large quantities. So overall, this will provide an annual reduction in the costs, again, with some uncertainty, around 1.1 billion per year, and due to the reduced ragweed pollen exposure. So this is the end of the talk here, the lecture, and I say thank you for your attention. Again, the study itself was part of the SMARTER project. It was supported by the cost action during the period 2012 to 16. Again, the web pages are now available on the International Ragweed Society. The paper itself and all the background data and the figures will be are available on this link here. So all the data as well as the figures can be downloaded in case you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carsten, for your very interesting and nice presentation. Now I'm happy to introduce Lucie Anzivino from the Regional Health Observatory of the region of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes in Lyon, France. Please, Lucie.
Thank you very much. I will try to find my... I can't find my presentation. It is not on the... I can't... find my presentation. Please. How can I do?
I think that you click on the share the video, share your desktop.
Yes, but I can't find the desktop on the share screen.
Please continue with the next presentation.
Okay, maybe Carsten, can you introduce my presentation?
Yes, yes. So again, so that I'm happy to introduce my co-session leader here, Mara Bonini from Italy, and Mara will then present new data also related to the ragweed beetle, and the lecture here is there a new rise of both ragweed pollen levels and ragweed allergy in the relation to the reduction of Aerobiology Kommune in northern Italy? So a very interesting lecture, and Mara, the floor is yours, and looking forward to an interesting lecture.
Hello everybody. Now I'm here again, and I'm talking about the possible new rise of both ragweed pollen levels and ragweed allergy in relation to the reduction of Boffarella comune in northern Italy. Previous studies showed a reduction of ragweed pollen levels in the northwest Milan area since 2013 due to the spread of Boffarella comuna, an insect that preferably feeds on ambrosia, thus preventing pollen production. Nevertheless, a decreased spread of Boffarella was recently observed, as reported in this Ragweed Observatory letter from the French Ragweed Observatory and from our observational unpublished data. The aim of our study was to evaluate if ragweed pollen levels were maintained or if there is a rise, seeing the reduction of Boffarella in the studied area, including zones with different extent of ragweed infestation, and also to assess the possible impact on health. Now let's see the methods. Ragweed pollen was sampled by 3 yeast volumetric traps located in zones with different extent of infestation. Legnano and Magenta located in the ancient zone, whilst Raw in the recent zone. The daily average pollen concentrations were expressed as particles per cubic meter of air. The observation period ranged from 1995 to 2019 for Legnano and from 2000 to 2019 for Magenta and Raw. The seasonal pollen integra, the peak value and its day, and the number of days exceeding proposed clinical thresholds were analyzed. The clinical data were collected by 3 allergy clinics in the surroundings of the pollen monitoring station, Legnano, Magenta, and Paderno Dugnano. The number of the first examinations regarding the total respiratory allergy, the total pollinosis, and ragweed pollinosis were analyzed. The observation period ranging from 2005 to 2019. Pollen and clinical data trends were calculated by non-parametric means using a Cox-Stewart test, and p less than 0.05 was considered significant. Now let's see the results. A significant seasonal pollen index decrease was observed for all 3 stations, Legnano, Magenta, and Raw, as you can see in this graph. Whilst a significant peak value decrease was observed only in Legnano and Raw, as you can see in this other graphic. No trend was observed for the day of the peak value. Please note that since 2018, an increase of the seasonal pollen index was observed in all 3 stations, whilst an increase of the peak value was observed only in Legnano and Magenta. A significant decrease of the number of days higher than 100 pollen per cubic meter was observed in all 3 stations, Legnano, Magenta, and Raw, as you can observe in this graph, whilst a significant decrease of the number of days with more than 50 pollen per cubic meter was observed only in Raw. For the other 2 stations, the decrease was not significant. Again, please note that in 2009, an increase was observed in both cases. About the clinical data, a global significantly reduced rate of ragweed allergic subjects was observed in 1 allergy clinic in Paderno, located in the most recent infested zone, as you can see in these 2 graphs. Nevertheless, in the same allergy clinic, an increase was detected in 2019, according with the increase of the ragweed pollen level. In the other allergy clinics located in the most insect-infested zone, the differences didn't reach significance, but an increase was observed starting from 2018 and continuing in magenta, or is stable in Legnano. In conclusions, over the long term, the reduction of ragweed pollen levels in the Milan area was maintained. Nevertheless, the ragweed pollen levels increased since 2018 in coincidence with a decreased presence of Faella comuna. A positive impact on health was detectable until 2018, only where the infestation was more recent. Starting from 2018, the allergy clinics recorded an increase of the ragweed allergic subjects, possibly reflecting the increase of pollen levels associated with a decrease of Faella comuna in this area. Thanks for your attention.
And we will wait with the questions, but please type them in using the platform, and we'll quickly move to the next session. I think we are ready with session number 2. Is that correct? So it's presentation number 2.
No, please continue with number 4.
Okay, we'll continue with number 4. Yes. So, so number 4 here again. So that's also from northern Italy here. The features of ragweed allergy, symptoms and drug consumption related to airborne ragweed pollen concentrations in northern Italy again. So the presentation here will be from Valentino Ceriotti, also from Mara's group in northern Italy, again, looking forward to a very interesting lecture here. So Valentina, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Valentina Ceriotti, and I would like to thank the European Aerobiology Society for the grant and for the possibility to attend this important symposium. Now I'm talking about the features of ragweed allergy, symptoms and drug consumption related to airborne ragweed pollen concentrations in northern Italy. Ragweed is a relevant allergenic risk factor in many countries of the world. The Northwest Milan area is one of the most infested zones in Europe, as you can see in this map. The aim of our study was to assess the correlation between airborne ragweed pollen load, symptoms intensity, and drug consumption. If this correlation was different in the ragweed allergen-specific immunotherapy treated compared to those not treated. If there was an influence of airborne mugwort pollen on symptoms, and if it is possible to define specific health thresholds for airborne ragweed pollen. Ragweed pollen grains were collected by 3 East volumetric traps located in the Northwest Milan area, respectively in Legnano, Magenta, and Rho, as you can see in this map. Data were expressed as particles per cubic meter of air, and the average of the daily ragweed pollen concentrations of the 3 stations was used. Ragweed allergic patients, 80 treated or not, were enrolled by 5 allergy clinics close to the pollen traps, as you can see in the graphic. The allergy clinics are indicated in purple. Observation period ranged between mid-July to mid-September 2014. Within this period, all patients compiled a daily diary of the symptoms and drugs taken. Non-parametric correlation tests were used to examine the correlation among daily pollen concentrations and the symptoms intensity. All statistical analyses were carried out using the software R. 71 patients were enrolled, in particular 46 not 80 treated and 25 80 treated. We found a high significant correlation between ragweed pollen load and the symptoms intensity in the not 80 treated, indicated with the black line in this graphic. We found a moderate significant correlation in 80 treated, indicated with the green line. The 80 treated mean symptoms levels over the entire observation period were significantly lower than in the non-80 treated, as you can see in this graphic, where 80 are indicated with the red line, while not 80 are indicated with the blue line. We observed a high positive correlation between the number of symptoms and drug consumption in the not 80 treated, as you can see in this graphic, where not 80 treated are indicated with the black dots. In patients treated with 80, indicated in the graphic with the white dots, such correlation was slightly lower, but still statistically significant. We found a high significant correlation between ragweed pollen load and drugs consumption in both not 80 and 80 treated, as you can see in the graphic, where 80 are indicated with the red line, and while not 80 are indicated with the green line. Blue line indicated the concentration of ragweed. No significant correlation was found between symptoms and the very low airborne maggot pollen load, as you can see in the graphic. In this graphic, the red line represents the concentration of ambrosia pollen, while the green line represents the concentration of artemisia pollen. In conclusion, in ragweed allergy patients, there is a significant correlation between symptoms and the concentration of pollen in the air. 80 treatment significantly reduces the mean number of symptoms, and there was not an influence of airborne maggot pollen on symptoms. Based on our findings, it will be possible to define specific health thresholds for airborne ragweed pollen, but more specific studies are necessary. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Valentina. We have two lectures left, so we will quickly move to the last two, and then we'll take the questions at the end of the session. So, Myra, are you ready for introducing the next one?
Yes. Now I'm happy to introduce Elisabeth Levac from the Bishop's University in Quebec, Canada. Please, Elisabeth.
Good morning. I'll be talking about the ragweed pollen season in Sherbrooke, Canada. And actually the season is getting longer and concentration are increasing. Ambrosia artemisifolia is a native plant in Canada. Nevertheless, it is causing allergies in a large percentage of the population, about 8% in the province of Quebec. And in United States, sensitivity tests show that at least 10% of the population is sensitive to ragweed. The ragweed season is getting longer across North America. In this table, location found at the center of the continent in a south to north latitudinal gradient show that the season is getting longer by almost a month, especially in the northernmost location like Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So this is a concern given that many people are affected by ragweed. In Montreal, closer to here, about 2 hours drive from Sherbrooke, we see that the pollen season for ragweed is 1 month longer in just 1 decade. And in general, we observe that flowering will start earlier in urban environments due to the warmer temperatures and increased CO2 concentration from car emissions and industry. So my research question was, do we observe a similar trend in a semi-urban setting like Sherbrooke, Quebec? And what is controlling the duration of the ragweed pollen season in that city? So Sherbrooke is about 130 kilometers east of Montreal. It's about the same latitude. It has a population of about 212,000 people, and population density is 456 inhabitants per kilometer. And it's a hilly region with many rivers, and it's surrounded by farmlands and countryside. So it's not really a dense urban setting. My study location is the borough of Lennoxville on the southern edge of the city, and you see from this Google map that it's surrounded by countryside in all directions. And it's a town of about 5,000 people, so not a very dense population. The climate is humid continental, so we have harsh winters and very warm summer. And I put the average date for spring frost. The last one usually is around May 19, and the first September frost is on the 29th. So the frost is playing a big role in the season for ragweed. I'm using a Burkard Spore Watch pollen sampler, and it's deployed on the roof of a building at Bishop's University. You got a photo of the campus here, again surrounded by farmlands and forests. So the duration of the ragweed pollen season in Sherbrooke, I put the start dates and the end date on this table, and the peak dates for concentration. But if we examine the duration, so I put data from 1983 and 1984 from master studies that was done in 1987, and the duration of the ragweed pollen season at that time was around 40 days. But if we look at the duration between 2007 and 2020, we see that, well, initially it was about the same duration, but we see that, well, here, of course, we had to end the sample early because of heavy rain in that month. But we see that since then, the duration has been increasing. And this year, it was 54 days, and it was a very, very warm summer. On average, the season starts at the beginning of August, sometimes in July. And well, this year it started as exceptionally early because we had an extremely dry summer, and it's usually ending sometimes in the middle of September. So which also often coincides with the first frost date. So usually when we have an early frost, it ends the season, but not always. In 2017, the end date was September 13, but the first frost only occurred at on October 12th. So it's not always a very good way to control the end of the season. The daily concentration peak sometimes in August. So these are the days of the year in numbers. So I put a square around the August. Rain doesn't seem to affect the concentration of ambrosia because you see that it often peaks even when you have heavy precipitation. So the ragweed pollen season is getting longer. It's starting earlier. We also have, well, a constant end of the season that seems to be controlled by the first frost, but probably by the length of the days as well. I didn't have a chance to look at the control for the pollen concentration, but drier summers and hotter summers certainly have a role to play in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your very interesting and very nice presentation. Now I hope that it is possible to see the presentation of Lucy. Lucy, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you see my presentation?
No, I hear you, but I don't see your presentation.
Please, the technical correct.
No, we are, it's okay. You can continue.
But Maya say she can't see my presentation.
No, we can see it.
Okay. So thank you. Sorry for the connection problem. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our work about the estimation of medical and economic costs related to ragweed allergy in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, France. First of all, I'm in charge of studies at the Regional Health Observatory, an associative organization with various profiles whose missions are to observe health indicators at different territorial scales in order to improve information, inform decision makers, and help them implement actions. Concerning ragweed, given the extent of the phenomenon in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, where at least 20% of the population have been exposed over 20 days per year to an allergic pollen risk index greater or equal to 3, the Regional Health Agency created a multidisciplinary study group in which the OS is involved since 2009. The objectives of the working group are twofold: how to estimate the number of people affected by ragweed pollenosis and the associated healthcare costs through simplified and reproducible studies, alerting and raising awareness in communities. Let's talk about medico-economic studies. We attempt to quantify the ragweed pollenosis impact in the population of the region by estimating the sanitary cost, that is to say, number of persons affected, and the cost of medical care related to ragweed pollenosis, and based on anonymous request in a global French health public insurance database, the National System of Health Data, called SNDS. The methodology developed consists in identify so-called tracer drugs for ragweed allergy, presenting a peak in consumption among the region's insured persons aged 6 to 74 years old. Identify an individual having at least one reimbursed for these tracer drugs. For each individual, the analysis focused on the amount of overall spending on drugs and medication in order to calculate the number of people with suspected allergies and the cost associated with different types of care, consultation, medication, tests. Some results. In 2017, A detailed analysis of cost and rates shows that the under 10 and over 65-year-olds are particularly concerned here and here by the care for ragweed allergy. Acts of desensibilization are more frequent in young people in rows, and act of consultation among the elderly, here green. And finally, numerous sick leaves are observed among the working population in blue. In 2018, the cartographic analysis by commune of potentially allergic people shows significant disparity in the region, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, with specifically the Rhône Valley here and the Nord-Isère here particularly impacted. This represents 11% of the population having consumed care, more than 3,520,000 people. These data are consistent with the spatial estimation carried out by the Air Quality Monitoring Association. You can see here, this map estimates the number of days with an allergic pollen risk index greater than 3, that is to say, when all allergic people present symptoms. Finally, in 2019, concerning cost, they are mainly due to action of consultation for 50% of the total expenditure, that is to say, more than 12 million euro. Anti-allergic and asthma drugs for 13%, that is to say more than 7 million euro. We can also see that 4% of biological testing is performed and 30% of desensibilization acts. Overall, cost of care consumption related to ragweed allergy are estimated at least 30 million euros, and some other data must be considered as sick leaves, for example, we can see in 1970. In conclusion, these fairly simple and routinely reproducible studies make it possible to estimate the number of people allergic to ragweed, even if it is necessary to refine the protocol and consolidate the results, for example, by conducting further epidemiological prevalence studies. Finally, due to changes in the database, the evolution over time since 2017 is sometimes complex. Nevertheless, these studies already show significant costs that reflect only part of the iceberg and mobilize all stakeholders in the fight against ragweed in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes and beyond. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for your original presentation. Now, Carsten, we can move to the question.
Yes, so yes, we will move to the questions. So we have about 10 minutes, and for the time being, we have about 15. Some of them are quite similar related to the ragweed beetle, but it seems that more questions are coming in all the time to all the different presentations. So I will take them from the bottom, and hopefully we'll be able to reach to the end. And with respect to those that are quite similar, I'll try to read up several of the questions and then answer them all in one go. So if we start here, there's a question from Clara Hogner, to Carsten here. So how specific is the ragweed beetle? Are no other hosts known? And Jeroen Boetes asked about something similar here. Firstly, are you afraid that when Ophrella has eaten all ragweed and it gets hungry, it will host on other plants, which could result in a catastrophe? And he's also asking, is it easy to kill or get rid of Ophrella? So firstly, as far as we know, it's native to United States and North America, and we do not yet know. No, we have never observed whether it's hosting on other plants. So for the time being, once ragweed disappears, they seem to die. It will simply, there will be no more food for them, and the population will stop to expand. With respect to so this suggests there's very limited risk. So again, taking into account that we're moving it into another continent, and things may be unexpected things might happen. And then we can say, is there a risk whether it's it's eating something else? Well, there's been a number of experiments, and when they tried to, for example, place it in sunflower fields, and for the time being, no records that it's actually when it's getting hungry, it's moving to other plants. And can we actually kill it? Well, actually, part of this experiment here did involve killing Ophrella, because the actual field experiments, we actually had to get rid of the use of insecticides in order to ensure that the Ophrella, it was actually increasing in numbers. Because what the farmers are usually doing is that they spray insecticides, and this will also kill Ophrella. And this could also be a reason why. I think this is one of the questions further up, that why we see a different behavior in United States compared to Europe, as an example. Well, it depends on whether we are in an area where you're spraying with insecticides and you accidentally also kill the beetle. I think that was the first set of questions. Then there's from Jonathan Peter here. What are the potential negatives of allowing this invasive species to expand? For instance, what else do the beetles feed on in areas without ambrosia, or do they not survive? Again, related question. For the time being, there's no records that they actually do survive, that they tend to die. There's also a question here related to this. For alle kommuner lead to local extension of the ragweed also outside urban environments. What would be the ethical from a conservational biology perspective? So I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question here on the ethics. Again, for the time being, all we know is that once the plants disappear, it will die again. So more on these things. I think Pia asked similar questions that is spreading in the USA. So it is actually native from the USA. So this also relates to the situation in the USA, because in USA and North America, there is a balance between what agriculture is doing, the beetle that has always been present, and the pollen concentration. So if you remove the beetle in the United States, even though they have high concentration, there's a risk that it will be like Europe, that we're getting even higher concentrations. So I think that's it. Then there's a question here, probably from Myra, both from Bernard Clos, Jeroen, and Lechi de Vega. So there's a question. Ambrosia pollen was declining already from 2010. Was Ophrella already there in 2010, Mara?
In 2020, we observed a light decrease of the seasonal pollen integral and the peak value in the two stations of Legnano and Rho, whilst in the situation is stable in magenta.
Yeah.
And I see also a question from Jeroen about 2010. In that year, the decrease was due to the impressive preventive measures were carried out in our area. And coming back to 2020, we don't have clinical data now. They are available only in the next year.
And
Yes, so now we're moving to the next set of questions from Lucas Grevling, Letty de Vega, Bernard Clos, and Monica, all to Elizabeth. So we start with the first one from Lucas Grevling to Elizabeth. Any news about Ophrella beetle in Quebec? So Elizabeth?
Yes. I never really noticed that that insect. It's probably present, but I think our winters are really long, so there's probably just one cycle of reproduction, and I haven't noticed anything on the plants.
Yeah.
Plants are affected.
We can probably add to this also. If you're looking into Europe, the predicted area where it's going to be the Ophrella does not coincide entirely with ragweed, so it will only be in the main centers, but once it's getting too cold, then it will not start to populate the area. So it seems that ragweed is able to expand to a bigger area compared to where we actually can have the ragweed beetle. So this is probably, Quebec probably has similar climate to, for example, Central and Northern Europe, where we're not expecting to see the beetle.
Because I had a patch of ragweed in front of my house, and the plants were intact. Like there were no insects eating them.
Yeah. So then there's another question here to you from Letty de Vega, and she's writing, I thought that day length was also involved in the start of the season. Is that a factor of relevance in Canada?
Well, that's a question I have, because I noticed that most of the years we have frost a bit later, and we still see the season end in the middle of September. Of course, it's already cool, so even if we don't have frost, the plants might still be responding to that. We're not that far north; it's only 45 degrees in latitude, but the plants seem to stop producing pollen around middle September.
Yeah, okay. Then we move to the next question, also to you, Elizabeth, from Bernard Clos. He's writing, changes in the abundance of ragweed population in the area. So these your observations, or could it be climate change or other things?
All of that. Ragweed will love vacant lots, so disturbed lands. We find it around train tracks, but and the city here has been expanding a little bit, but so I would suspect there are less vacant lots where the plant can thrive. So I think it's a factor of having drier and hotter summers than in the past.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, thank you. Then we move to a question to Elizabeth. That is also to you, Elizabeth. Same as Lucas, in case you have the beetle, have you also seen difference in the populations at the same time? It's been increased. So this is related again to really the same question as Bernard. But as I understand, you haven't seen the beetle for the time being.
Well, I didn't look for it. I just learned about this morning, so I really didn't look for the beetle, but I assume it's a species from North America. Yes. So there's probably lots of predators for that insect. So it's not an invasive species here.
Yeah,
so it's probably kept in a reasonable number of individuals.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then there's a question from Jonathan Peter to Lucie. Could you explain, please, again, how the costs such as skin prick test are specifically linked to the ragweed rather than other aeroallergens? So this separation between ragweed and other aeroallergens?
So, yes. I don't understand, please. I don't hear.
Yes. So again, so can you say again how the costs such as skin prick tests are specifically linked to ragweed?
Oh, yes. In fact, we try to choose a target population, and we we identify people who take anti-allergic drugs between the population aged 26 to 74 years in the residing in the region who have at least 1 burst of the drugs during the period of pollination of the ragweed. For example, between July and October. And we ask in the database, we try to find all people who have at least 1 reimbursement for these drugs, tracer drugs, and then we can see all care acts they have in this period.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Then there's a question from Ragweed. She's asking, would it be possible that ambrosia can adapt in the future so that some of the plants will not be eaten anymore by Orfrella? And probably yes. So ambrosia, as far as we know, is very plastic. So, and it's one of the reasons is that it's able to self-fertilize. So, so what's been observed that in some parts of Europe, maybe they start flowering a little bit earlier. So what will happen if we're having, for example, the ragweed beetle and will eat most of the plants? But it's really when we're getting into the second and the third and the fourth generation, which will promote that fraction of the gene pool that will be flowering a little bit earlier. So what we can, for example, see that a defense mechanism from ambrosia is that if they flower a little bit early and they grow faster, then they will have the chance to at least complete part of their reproductive cycle before there are too many ragweed beetles around. Again, no one really knows whether this will happen, but this will be a typical mechanism you can see. Yes, and then we have a question from Concepcion de Linares again to Valentina. So it's really about how did you calculate the total number of symptoms? So Valentina, could you answer this, please? Hello, Valentina.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the question. We submit the total number of symptoms for all patients. Sorry.
Yes. So, Valentina, I couldn't hear you.
One moment, please.
Yes. Yes. While you're waiting for this, then I will take the 2 last questions, and then the last one will be Valentina's. So that's 2 questions from Vukas again and Carl Frisk, related questions. The first is, why do we see high pollen concentrations in North America? And the second is there likely to be unforeseen consequences promoting the beetle? Will it start to feed to something else, on something else? For the time being, there's no information about that. Again, it hasn't been seen. It's not seen in the United States, so where it's actually present natively. So the risk appear to be very limited, but of course we have to be really, really cautious about these things because we have some not very good examples from the past where some of these things, if you start to promote another invasive species to fight a problem, that you're getting some unexpected effects. So again, need to be controlled really, really carefully. But for the time being, it seems that we also have an effective mechanism for killing the beetle itself, just using ordinary insecticides, and could be a reason why it's not being that effective in North America. Yes. So Valentina, this last question, are you ready?
Yes. We divided the patient into group, AT treated and not AT treated. And for each group, we summed the total number of symptoms of the patients.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Yes, so thank you very much, and I think this was the last question. At least this is the last question I can see here. So I'll say that this will end the Ragweed session. So this concludes the session, and thank you very much, everyone, and for the contribution. Thank you to all the lectures, and thank you to Mara for the sharing of this session. And then I'll say, please continue to the next session. So this will be the last bit from this session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.